Hi, today I want to talk about making kombucha for the very first time. I personally have not done this before. I was very recently gifted a kombucha starter tea. This is needed for you to make new kombucha batches. The fermentation process requires this. So if you look at it, there are two SCOBYs that are floating kind of suspended in the liquid. And there's also a fresh one that's growing right at the top, the jelly-like thing that you see it right there at the top. So this is the starter tea. It's kind of vinegarish right now. It does smell a bit sourish, and that's a pretty decently strong starter tea. And over here I have a new home for my SCOBYs and my kombucha. It's a 3-liter jar. So I'll be using this to store my new batches. Now you might be wondering why I have those brown paper bags covering both the jars. So kombucha generally likes darker environments, and I'm not going to be storing this in a cabinet or a closet. So I kind of just cut up paper bags, tape them together, and use it to cover the jars as and when they're fermenting. We start by ensuring that everything is sterile and clean. It's very important because you don't want any other bacteria that's on the jar or on any other surfaces that could disrupt the fermentation process. Now I've rinsed this jar already, but just before we start, I'm just going to rinse it again with hot water just to be a little extra precautious. I am a bit nervous because this is the first time I'm fermenting kombucha. I think that fermenting kefir has been a lot more forgiving. I haven't had any problems with the kefir fermentation, but I've read so many things that could potentially go wrong with kombucha that maybe I'm a little bit paranoid. So just rinsing it one more time won't hurt me. So we need to make the starter tea. I'm going to make a 1.5-liter starter tea today. So I'm just pouring in about 500 milliliters of hot water. This is just to make the base of the tea, and I'll cool it off with room temperature water later on. That way it brings down the temperature a lot quicker. So to start with, I'm going to add about half a cup of brown sugar. This is a organic unprocessed cane sugar. I use the same sugar for kefir, so it's available. It's about half a cup. I'm not really going to be that precise and use an actual measuring cup for this. Now, as I'm about to mindlessly stir the sugar and try to melt it into the water, let's just take a couple of seconds to play a game and ponder a riddle with me. Now, a horse got spooked, okay, and it ran straight into a forest. How far can the horse run into the forest? We'll talk about the answer towards the end of the video. And back to the kombucha, I'm now going to steep 4 tea bags into the sugar water. This is just regular black tea. I'm using Lipton. I guess it really doesn't matter what brand you use, but it is suggested to use black tea as opposed to green tea or any of the other herbal teas or mint, at least if this is the only kombucha SCOBY you have. Now I'm adding another 250 milliliters of hot water. Eventually I will add in another 750 mils of room temperature water. Now you can definitely use boiling water throughout, so you can use 1.5 liters to 2 liters of boiling water. It's really not an issue. But the reason I'm mixing half and half is so that the sweet tea mixture will cool down a lot faster than if I was to use an entire pot of hot boiling water. Now you can't put in the SCOBY and the starter tea when the water is boiling, because the starter tea and SCOBY are live bacteria. You will kill it. I'm just gonna let the tea steep inside for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes you can see the tea is a lot darker now, and I'm ready to take the tea bags out. Now this sweet tea concoction is basically the food for the bacteria. That's the starter tea and the SCOBY, so they will be feeding on all the sugar that we have put into our sweet tea mixture. I'm just gonna let it cool down for about a couple of hours, and once it's at room temperature. I'm gonna scoop out some of the tea, the sweet tea. To keep that aside, I'll be replenishing it in the starter tea. That's a smaller jug that you see. Just in case, something goes wrong, I'm just gonna make sure that I have 2 portions as opposed to keeping everything in 1 jar. And now to add in the most important ingredient, the starter tea and the SCOBY. Now it's a little bit nerve-wracking because I think a lot of things could go wrong from here. I'm not sure if the starter tea is strong enough. But look at that though. I mean, the SCOBY is so pretty. It's so smooth. It's like a little gelatin disc. I don't know. I really want to just dig my fingers inside it and see, just to see what it feels like. But at the same time, this is the very first batch. I probably should not do that. I should probably be using something to pull out the SCOBY in a little bit. So I'll just to make it a little bit easier on myself, I'm just going to add in a little bit of the starter tea first before putting in the SCOBY itself. So to about 1.5 liters of the sweet tea, I'm just going to be putting just over a cup of the starter tea. That's pretty much half of what I have at this point in time. So I want to make sure I don't waste any of it or spill any of it. So the starter tea is what makes the sweet tea concoction a little bit more acidic, and that is what prevents the growth of bacteria, or I guess mold. So if your starter tea is strong enough, you don't really have the issue of mold growing on top of the SCOBY. Okay, it's the SCOBY is really slippery, and it's very slippery. So I'm just gonna put the baby SCOBY into the jar, and I'm gonna keep the 2 bigger ones in that small jar I'm holding right now. Again, like I mentioned, it's really diversification of risk. I don't want to lose everything on my first attempt. Well, that went pretty well. I didn't drop the SCOBY, so I am really happy. I really thought that I would drop the SCOBY. I had this image in my head where it was flopping around like a pancake. So the rest of the sweet tea, I'm just gonna put inside that jar over there. That way the older starter tea can actually get a little bit more food. The SCOBY inside that jar will eat up the sugar that's in the sweet tea I just added in, and hopefully another SCOBY will grow, and obviously hopefully the existing SCOBYs remain strong, and that remains a pretty decent starter tea for my next batch if I need. So hopefully I get 2 successful batches out of this single brew. So now I'm just gonna cover it. This will allow the concoction to breathe. They do need to breathe in order to reproduce. They are living bacteria after all. But you obviously cannot use the original lid because it will suffocate. You shouldn't leave it open as well without having a cover, because bugs could go in, dirt could fall in, a lot of things can happen. So it'll be a good idea to actually just use maybe a cheesecloth or a kitchen towel. I'm using a reusable kitchen towel. I'm sure there are a lot of better options, but this is what I have available to me at this point in time. So let's get back to the riddle I mentioned a bit earlier in the video. So the horse can only run as far as halfway into the forest. Why? Because if it continues, it'll be running halfway out of the forest. Well, that made my day. I hope you got it. If you did, or you're rolling your eyes, that's great. If you didn't get it, you probably need a nap. So now I'm just taking the jars and putting them back into the brown paper kind of, I guess, containers. That way they are always in a kind of dark environment, which is a lot better for them. They don't quite like very bright or very harsh environments. So you're not supposed to really touch them or disturb them for about a week. But knowing myself, and again, this is one of the reasons I'm using a paper bag to cover them, I do want to check on it on a daily basis, especially because this is the first time I'm doing this. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and hope you enjoyed it. Bye!